name is Joanne, and I want to welcome you to the One to Another podcast. Today, we're going to talk about a subject that's pretty personal, and I want to talk about how to say goodbye when you have been given the prognosis that your loved one may have less or maybe a little more than 6 months to live. And you have to learn how to live when you know someone is dying. I can tell you about it because it wasn't very many months ago that my husband Ron was given the prognosis that his life was probably going to end, and he had some mini strokes and some kidney failure. And at the age of 90, I guess you would think that that's about what happens to people. But when you're optimistic and you think life is going to go on, maybe for at least 10 more years, you have to come to the realization that sometimes physically there's things that change. And when you've been married for 26 years, because remember, this is my third marriage, because my first husband at the age of 46 died of a heart attack next to me in bed. And then I was single for about 6 years and remarried. And 5 years later, my second husband wanted a divorce and move into a different lifestyle. And so then I met Ron. And after we started going together, we just knew that we fit together. And even though we had some opposite things that we loved to do, there was a common denominator in our relationship of love. And of love also value and respect. And so we were married on the cruise. We had to get married before the cruise left the port, but we were married before we left for Alaska. And so now, after all these years of wonderful times being together, we've come to a place of looking at life in a little different way. It's called anticipatory grief. And that's the grief that you realize that every day is a gift and you don't know how many more every days you're going to have. But as we still live and love each other, life has changed. And in that change, I am working on saying goodbye to the relationship that we've had and no longer can have, because physically he has changed. And so I've been realizing things that we used to do that we no longer can do. And one of the things that I've been working on and saying goodbye to is I'm saying goodbye to ever seeing Ron drive a car again. Now, cars were always important to Ron. When we lived on the farm, he would buy 2 or 3 cars and want to work on them. And it was always these classic cars. And, he'd get them, and there were certain things he could do with them and certain things he'd have done. But he was always loving cars. And so I realized that once he had these mini strokes and had these problems in his kidneys, that he was no longer going to be able to drive. That's a hard thing for a man to come to. And yet, when we told him, he took it like a man. He didn't complain about it. He didn't say, "Are you sure?" He just took it and said, he realized that because his blood pressure is so low that he's dizzy a lot and doesn't see well. In fact, it's very difficult for a guy who was into teaching at a university level that read all kinds of books, could no longer read. And so I just remember that as we faced the fact that he was no longer going to be able to drive. And so as I was thinking about that change in our life, was that I needed to do all the driving and he was going to be the passenger. And so as I started thinking about it, I thought, you know what? I need to say goodbye to seeing him wash our cars. He loved to wash cars, and he would do that. And I think it was in 2015 that we bought a 2007 Mercedes-Benz convertible. It was a CLK 500. Bright red convertible, had every kind of every kind of thing you needed that was extra. And so that was really a fun car for us. And then I realized that, you know what, I would never see him driving that car again. And so I needed to say goodbye to riding on the fun trips in the car, letting the breeze blow in my face, and seeing the joy of Ron driving the car. Sometimes he would call me and say, "Hey, Joanne, it's about the end of the day. Do you want to go for a special ride?" I'd say, "Sure." So I'd park my car someplace before I ever got home. And guess what? He'd drive up in his red convertible, open the door, get out, open the door on my side, and say, "Madam, you are in for a treat." And so, we get in it, and he'd drive off, and we'd go for a long ride. We'd stop someplace and have dinner. And every time we would park the car in any place, of course, he'd park it a long ways from anybody because he didn't want anybody to do anything to it. But people would come around it and want to know, "Hey, what about this car?" And of course, he loved talking about it. And so I have so many wonderful memories of driving off with him to a surprise place for dinner and just enjoying the fun of having a very special car. So seeing him and knowing that he would never drive again, and realize that probably we'd need to sell the Mercedes. We had a 3-car garage, but we realized that he would never drive it again, and for sure I wasn't going to be driving it. And so a friend of ours really wanted the car. And so we talked about it and felt like he'd be the perfect person for us to sell it to. And since he was no longer driving, that he'd be perfect for it. So he came, paid Ron the money for the car and drove off. Well, our 3-car garage now had 2 cars in it. And I can remember Ron going out into the garage and just walking around where that car was parked, and now it's empty. And not only did I sense the emptiness of not having that car there, but I know that he was working through his own personal grief about not being able to drive again. And so it's interesting, in a couple who has had privileges and fun about driving together, each of us goes through our own grief. And we both come to a place where we realize, you know what, we won't be driving together in a car again. That was so special to us. And it was one time when he was just walking around the garage that was empty. He just stopped in the middle and said, "It's time for me now to say goodbye. Time for me to let go of the fact the car's gone. I'm not going to be driving it anymore. And I need to release that car." In the meantime, I'm going through the same thing, thinking about that the car's gone, that I'm saying goodbye to never being in that car again, and letting go of the grief that I was feeling. So you see, it's amazing in life when we're going through change that we both go through change, especially when it's something that's anticipatory grief, that we both go through it, maybe not the same way, but we were able to talk about it and say goodbye. Certainly his eyesight has never recovered, and so we needed to say goodbye also this fact that driving and not being able for him to see well enough to drive. And so as I went through these points of releasing and saying goodbye to an activity that we've done together to letting it go, then I needed to say hello and work through some hellos and saying hello to safety and understanding more in my own heart about one being a whole number. And also realizing that good memories are here to stay, and realizing that as we have let go of this, that Ron was now using a walker, and we needed to say hello to a walker so he could be safe and balanced in his walking and had some new wheels. So for a while we'd say, okay, you're going to be walking with your new walker. What's your walker like today? Is it a yellow Mustang? Or is it a red convertible? Or is it a blue Ford? We just tried to kind of make fun and think about it so that as we are letting go, we could say hello to a new place and kind of make it fun. And so I have learned slowly in the process of saying goodbye, not to the relationship, but to an activity that in our relationship we could no longer do. And I've learned that whenever there's an exit, there's an entrance into someplace else. And so I've learned to appreciate being able to still drive. I appreciate the fact that very slowly I'm learning when it comes to that particular activity that one is a whole number and that I can do this. Sometimes when I'm driving, do I think about what we've had? I do. But I realize that this part of our relationship has changed. And change is inevitable, but growth is optional. So we have to learn to change, and slowly, so slowly, we learn to grow in a new place. I don't know where you are in your life. I don't know if you've recently gone through a loss and you're realizing that your life is changing and that, yes, you have to face some places and say goodbye so that you can slowly move on. I can tell you it takes courage, it takes honesty, and it takes believing that there is something ahead that's good. I know that it takes a lot of time of thinking. There is that place kind of where you have to be by yourself some, and you have to work through some of your own thoughts and, do some journaling about what you're feeling and how you're feeling it. I know that I write more in my Count Your Blessing book, and I try in every way I can. I try in every way I can to write something down for which I'm thankful. And so, my thankful book is full of being thankful. And I'm thankful for cards that I get in the mail that say, I am with you, no response necessary. Thankful that people are willing to listen, because I've learned that there is a voice that doesn't use words. They just listen. I'm also thankful that all growth is costly. It involves leaving behind an old way of being in this world and looking at something new. I know that every one of us has to look at what we can be thankful for, because it does make a difference. I am thankful that gratitude fills, complaining drains. I'm thankful for the choice. And I get to make a choice every time I pick up my Count Your Blessing book and I begin to read something that I'm thankful for. I'm thankful that rest restores. I'm thankful that love finds quiet solitude and time to reflect. I'm thankful that laughter lifts and crying cleanses. So those are some of the things I've written about being thankful. And as you are choosing to walk through the places where you need to let go and say goodbye, I hope you remember that life goes on, but it can be a lot easier if we can face what we no longer have and can let it go and look for that new place where we can develop some new places. I hope that you'll think about getting the book I've written, How to Say Goodbye. It might help you. You can get that through our website, and you might be thinking about purchasing that book because it just might be what would help you. Or I also have a thumb drive of the 5 classes that I teach, and I do spend some time in the second session on saying goodbye, and that might be a help to you too. Both of those are available on our website. So I want to thank you for listening today, and I hope that your day finds some light and hope, and that you slowly are moving towards healing.